Good morning everyone, welcome to Thursday's Thought for the Day. Well, I had a very difficult conversation with someone this week. It was someone who I've known for a long time, someone who was really hurting and hurting deeply, someone who felt alone in the world, someone who felt that they had to sort everything out in their own lives, that there was no one there for them. Someone who is a Christian, but more often than not feels outside the church family. And beyond platitudes, I came to a point in the conversation where I felt I wasn't helping. And my responses were actually making things worse, seen as more evidence of him feeling alienated and alone, even more so. And then that made the anger even more evident. And it got to the point where my responses seemed to be blaming him for his predicament, although that was never the intention. And it troubled me that I wasn't able to reach out and beyond the barriers that were starting to be built. Not being able to help, not being able to take away the pain. And I'd fallen into the trap of thinking maybe I could solve everything for him. And that conversation coloured my whole day. It wouldn't leave me. Because I did care. But I felt that I'd failed as a friend. It was still in my thoughts, trying to sort it out on my own. And then came a growing realisation about the conversation that seems obvious in hindsight. We'd left God out of it. Here were two human beings at that moment in desperate need of God's wisdom in that conversation, and yet, although he was mentioned almost in passing, we didn't invite him in. And both of us ended up in a worse place than we had started. What we really needed to do was to invite him in, to make a conscious decision to invite him in, to pray there and then for peace, for wisdom, for comfort, for a way forward, in acknowledgement that neither one of us could sort this out. But we didn't. Leaving God out of the equation is no wise move. You know, this friend I was speaking of was overwhelmed by their feelings of isolation, and with that came anger that no one understood or cared. And I was overwhelmed by my inability to demonstrate that I cared. By the fact that I couldn't take the loneliness away. And we were both overwhelmed by the feeling the other wasn't really listening or understanding. And we needed to call a truce and to call on God. You know, when we become wrapped up in the problems we're facing, there can be times when we unknowingly push God out, forgetting, as it says in Psalm 119, your word is like a lamp for my feet, a light for my path. Our conversation lacked that light, for we had unknowingly pushed God out of it. And we were concerned with our own frustration, with our own hurt, with our own anxieties that were only added to as the conversation progressed. See, the only way we can see our way through the dark times is to allow God in, to allow him to heal past hurts and broken relationships, to allow him to guide our responses to our hurts, to help us to respond in love and not in anger and defensiveness, to know that we don't have all the answers, to give up trying to do everything in our own strength. I'm not always good at those things, but I want to be. Like each one of us, I'm a work in progress. And I know that these are truths and that they enable me to lead a better life. We need to come to the realization that God never intended for us to remain in darkness when his light can illuminate the darkness that attempts to destroy our lives. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, has God's word become a bright light that can illuminate the darkness with us? Or have we allowed the light of God's word to burn out because we're allowing the circumstance of our lives to overwhelm us and become more powerful than the presence of God? That's a question I'll leave you with. That's a question that I'm asking myself. Well, I'll speak to you next week now, next Monday. Look after yourselves. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.